you manage the deer population for the benefit of the deer, or you manage it for the benefit of the people. And I think when you have deer in a residential area, you have both extremes. You have people that don't really care, that let the deer do what they want, and there are others that they don't want the deer at all. So I don't know how you translate that to that fact, but I would make a comment about the fence area. And it goes back to the forage areas that deer have. It's really most of the information you see that's been around for a long time that's detailed is relates to non-urban areas, and it's based on acres of forage and that sort of thing. I think if we looked at the actual forage that's available to the deer in the village of Riverwoods, it's not 4 square miles. It's probably a lot less than that. Maybe as much as half of that. The simple math says to me is, if you fence off a certain percentage of that, and I don't know what that is based on, we can figure that out based on the number of deer fences, you can deduct that from the available forage area too. I don't know that people have got a lot of detailed studies on what that incremental impact is, but just from a logical standpoint, to me, it seems that as you continue to reduce the forage that's available to whatever the deer population is, it's going to accelerate the impact on the places that aren't protected. I think it's no more complicated than that. So, in terms of just the concepts of it, what the actual research details and all that stuff are, that's another issue, because there's like at our house, we've got this luxurious quarter-acre lot, and it's got a lot of trees and stuff on it. And my wife's roses in her garden, and the only thing that survived the annual visit of the deer were the leeks that you had planted. So it's interesting. We also had a fawn borer in the front yard, which was kind of an interesting thing. But I think it goes back to my comments about really looking at this as to how it works in this urban arena and how those things fit. But I think it's pretty simple. I think the coyote population that we have is to some degree going to be predatory on the deer, probably the smaller ones, and the less firm ones and those kinds of things.
10% of the fawns every year are taken by coyotes.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people that look at that. So I think those are some of the variables to factor into it. But at the end of the day, management of the deer is kind of like a moving target, and it's going to go up and down, and finding this, some medium way to address it, I think is probably the issue here. So it's really, like I said, politically, it's a complicated solution. I think mechanically, at least in my mind, the identification of the variables is pretty obvious. How you quantify those and how you figure percentages of impact and some of those related things is maybe a different issue. But I think that's what we got. So like I said, when I go through Rich's comments, we can kind of get together and mesh all that together.
Thank you. Any questions for Chuck? Any more? Rich, you want to?
Yeah, I didn't realize that Urban Forest Management was going to write a report. When I looked at your proposal, it didn't say anything about a report, so I thought in the absence of that, I would write a report. I'll make a couple of, just a couple of general comments, and I don't think I'll take quite as much time to go over it, and I won't go over it in detail, that's for sure. First, I wanted to establish in this for the record that if you do a literature search, you find that there are a couple of studies that were undertaken by wildlife biologists to determine what the accuracy of the deer count would be from the air. And they did this by penning deer, counting the deer, and then doing an aerial count. In 2 studies, they indicated that the accuracy of the aerial count was in the neighborhood of 50% to 75%. That is, you would count 50% or 75%. You count more if it's a prairie than if it's a woodland area. But these were done by wildlife biologists, and that is why Christopher Burke and the Lake County Forest Preserve District wildlife biologists, they accept and they use the figure of 75% accuracy. So if you take the actual count of the deer and you want to estimate if you take the actual aerial count and you want to estimate what the number were that are on the ground, you either divide by 0.75 or you multiply by 1.33. It's the same difference. So I wanted to establish that. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but In the literature search, it's there. The studies are there. It's difficult to count deer. And Chuck, I tell you what, it was an exercise in humility trying to keep up with Todd and with Kirsten. Even when Todd called out that he saw a deer, there were many times I didn't see him, even after he said 8 o'clock, two does. So it's very difficult, and I think it's difficult for the professionals, the people who have done it as well. One of the things that came out, shows you how difficult this is. On the 2 successive days that we did the count, and this is with the Urban Forest Management, the first day we counted a grand total of 54 deer. The second day we counted 99. Now, the personnel were the same, and so you think, well, why would there be that much of a difference? One thing is, deer do move around. Could we have imported 40 deer in one day? I don't think it's very likely. What I noticed
Why not?
from the cockpit,
Why not?
because deer don't move that much.
Oh, yes,
If
they
you
do.
look in the literature, they move on average about 1/2 to 1 square mile. That's in the wildlife literature, Bill. But beyond that, what I observed was on the first day, it was bright sun. And I've been told by the wildlife wildlife expert at Lake County that they prefer cloudy days. We had bright sun, which casts sharp, straight line shadows of the trunks. And I think that is the most likely explanation for the lower count the first day. But it's hard, we need to do this over to establish these discrepancies. The other thing that is harder to answer is this discrepancy between the wildlife count from the Christopher Burke and Lake County fellows when they did their survey on the, I believe it was the 11th and 12th. They counted on those 2 successive days 70 and 95 deer, and urban forest and actual deer. And Urban Forest Management and I counted 25 and 42 respectively. That's a substantial change from their survey to ours. They were conducted 1 week apart. Now there the personnel is different, and so it's harder to come to a conclusion why the discrepancies. Last thing I'd like to make a comment on is something you brought up, Bill. That is, one of my objectives was to see if there was this hot spot notion. That is, do the deer just spread themselves out uniformly in our village or not? And what we found were we counted no deer in Meadow Lake, we counted no deer in Thorngate, no deer in East Horse, no deer in Discover, no deer in the developed CCH property, I forget the new tenant. And the only deer, we did find deer in East Horse, but the only deer that we found were in the wooded area. They were not in the turf area, the fairways and greens and such. If I had to write down a prediction, if the hotspot theory were to be true, that's what I would have predicted. Now, is this a slam dunk? Is this a smoking pistol? I don't think so, but we're gathering evidence, and if we do this again another year, another 2 years, we will have more confidence in what we're doing. How does this affect, well, if there's a hot spot, how does this affect our understanding of deer in the village? It affects it this way. If the deer congregate in the wooded area and we count 50 deer, then we should assume that those 50 deer tend to be in the wooded area, and if we're looking for a density figure, we should use the wooded area as the area for the range of the deer. But as I say, this is a work in progress.
Thank you. Okay. We will do another deer count next year, I promise. Second reading, minority